Good evening. Welcome to Live United. This is an opportunity to hear about programs and initiatives happening in the Monadnock region that make a difference in the lives of our citizens. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Ryan Bell. Ryan is with SCS and is the Homeless Outreach Intervention and Prevention Specialist there. And seated beside him is Katie Zamore. Katie is the Homeless Outreach Worker for the PATH program at Monadnock Family Services. So thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having us.
You know, the homeless population, I think we oftentimes think there's maybe certain times of the year they need us, mostly in the cold months, but it's really a year-round issue. Can you tell us a little bit about why your particular programs, and Katie, I'll start with you. Why was MFS, why did they get involved with working with the homeless population?
Well, as many of us probably know, most of the homeless suffer from some type of mental health issue or substance abuse problem. So it's a year-round problem because that stuff obviously doesn't go away. Yes, you know, during the winter some of that depression gets worse, but it's an ongoing issue. So I think it's a good time for us to get involved. I think that there are always new people coming or people finally coming in for help so that we can get them intakes and get some services in place for them.
What percentage of the population that you work with do you think have mental health or substance abuse issues?
I hate putting a number on it. The majority, I don't have a percent for that, but the majority have some sort of either mental health issue or substance abuse problem going on. Not all, but obviously a good majority.
And Ryan, you're kind of a unique pairing, the two of you coming together on this, because Katie brings that outreach experience around the mental health, substance abuse, or the behavioral health issues. You bring something very different to that. You're focused on the housing end of it, but you also bring some life experience to this. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, what I do is I try to prevent people from being homeless. So I usually get a lot of my referrals from 211, and they give me kind of a lead on the scenario of what the individual is going through. So I then follow up with the individual by contacting them to see what they can do, or what I can do for them as far as meeting their needs. And together, this is great because, you know, as we talked about with her, a lot of people I deal with have some sort of mental illness or some sort of substance abuse. Now, I focus on the housing portion or the sheltering portion, while Katie can kind of help out with the mental illness and the addiction stuff. And, I learned a lot, through my experiences in the military of how to be driven and just following through and, not really necessarily giving up on somebody. You know, it's about follow through. You know, part of what I do is 6 months of case management, once they enter my program, and just to make sure that they're, not falling backwards. We're keep moving forward in the right direction, and so far it's working out well. Us as a pair, and I'm very fortunate to have a PATH outreach worker here. In most instances, there are people throughout the state that are both. So, I mean, I think we're very fortunate to have Hoyt Band PATH in the same area.
I think it's also really wonderful and such a great example of how collaboration occurs in the Monadnock region, that we have both Southwestern Community Services and Monadnock Family Services really teamed up on this particular issue. You mentioned that you had some vet experience, and Katie, what brought you to working in this field?
I actually moved to the Keene area in the beginning of 2010. I was a police officer here in Keene. A little over 4.5 years I was a police officer in Keene, and I felt some compassion for some of the homeless people we dealt with. I mean, compassion for all of them, but a couple of them stuck out in my mind. That I was having a hard time going home at the end of the day wishing I could do more for them. So when I ended my career at the police department, I was looking for something that would be a little bit more enjoyable, and I thought that the homeless aspect would be, and it has been. It's been a very rewarding job to have.
And Ryan, you mentioned that you had the veterans status, and I'm guessing that some of the folks that you both work with may be some of our vets.
Yes, indeed. I joined the military in 2002, did 4 years, I got out in 2006, and I had, I had trouble adjusting back to the civilian life. it was hard finding a purpose after you've been such a, tight group of individuals. You had missions, everything was very black and white. And when I got out, it was very gray to me. Little things would bother me about, people complaining about, the temperature outside, or how gas was inflated, or milk, or this, that, and the other. And for about 3 years, it took me a while to get settled and figure out my next niche. And that happened to be falling into working with the homeless. And I figured, well, if anything, the military taught me to lead by example. And I've been through pretty much it all myself, was damn near homeless, and I struggled with alcohol for a while. So I figured, well, what better way at least help some brothers and sisters that I've served than to be out there and kind of just say, I did it, you can do it. And it's not easy, but it's manageable, and it's just recognizing your triggers that that may be affecting you, and seeking out the help that will give you the hand up and keep you moving. So I started working at 100 Nights. I was volunteering 1 day a week there. That led to the managerial position at the drop-in center, where it was kind of neat. I kind of got to develop that and get it off the ground. And then it happened that volunteered there for 40, 60 hours a week, but volunteering doesn't pay the bills, so I had to look for something else. And SCS had a position open up, and it was great. I ran the shelters for a while, and I put a lot of time and effort and energy into that, and trying to just, again, lead by example. So that's what kind of brought me into this, is just kind of life experiences, and how can I help out? I had a mission overseas, and at that point, to me, in my own world, I felt that I've helped more people in, Kosovo and Iraq than I had really invested into my own people, if you will. So this is kind of my new thing right now, and I'm just going to keep running with it until I work my way out of a job, ideally. So.
That is obviously the hope for all of our programs, and I know you focus on the transitioning people into housing, and then you're really trying to help them get mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually probably stable, so that they can really stay in that housing. We work with Cheshire Housing as well, and they oftentimes say to us, we can get people sometimes into housing, but then we've got to deal with all the things that keep them in the housing. So it's a great sort of team thing we have going on here. Can you tell me what it was in response to? Because, we have 100 Night Shelter, we have Cheshire Housing, we have Keene Housing, and I would imagine that the public is probably wondering, why do we have to do this sort of outreach type of work?
I guess there's a lot of different scenarios that would run through my mind. Some people don't have income of any sorts. Sometimes there's not enough vouchers or subsidized housing to go around. Some people want to be out there. People always call about tents and things like that, and some people it's a lifestyle choice and they like being out there. So I guess, I don't know, there's no clear cut why we find different situations, I would say, every day. Everyone has a different story. So there's no, I don't think, quick fix. But a lot of things, I guess, come into factor. Some people can't work. Some people, lost jobs, or there's a lot of different things, I would say, for why people come homeless and why we need to outreach to them, whether it's, in the woods or on the street, or referrals from different agencies.
For me personally, I'm not sure what the landscape was like before I kind of got into this, social services world. But I like team effort. I think we're only as good as each agency in the town, in my opinion. So if we all work hand in hand together, like Katie had mentioned, each person is different. Each has a different variable. It ain't going to be one set template for each individual. And since I've been here, I've had no issues working with anybody from any agency. We've always been very upfront, helping each other out, trying to find the needs or fit the needs of the individuals that we're working with. And so I think that's the great part about this community, is that, we are, the agencies are doing their very best to combat these issues that, are out there, and we're, and trying to fix it if we can. And, as Katie mentioned, some people choose to be homeless, and you got to respect that as much as you want to see them in a better spot. And my whole kind of philosophy on it is, I'm just merely the suggestion box. At the end of the day, the individual I'm working with is going to do what they're going to do, and I can only support them the best I can. And maybe a week out, a year from now, 5 years from now, something eventually will set in. We're like, they have an aha moment, and they're like, you know what, Ryan, maybe I'm going to take you up on that housing. And that's all it is. It's being constant, and it's being persistent. And if you can do that, You gain trust. Trust is everything in this line of work. You know, I've always seen that the majority of the people I work with have had people in and out of their lives, and they really have never had a go-to figure. So if I can be that go-to person, or Katie can be that go-to person, and they feel comfortable opening up to us, then we've knocked down several walls right off the bat, and it makes it much easier to work with that person. And again, I you know, not to beat a dead horse, but it's leading by example. You know, it's, you know, don't tell them something you can't come through with. Just being upfront and honest, and I think that works really well. I think that's both the approach we take, because, I mean, I think it's fair to say we're not your traditional social workers. She's a former cop, I'm a former, you know, paratrooper. So we bring something different to the table, and it's no knock on anyone that goes to school. We need those people out there too, but it's just a different point of view. We've seen something that necessarily those college kids or college-educated people haven't seen, you know.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's so important that life experiences can be, when you think of relationships with people, those life experiences that you've had are really something that can build those relationships, can build that trust. And being able to be honest about what you can offer and not offer. And, you know, I think the homeless population is an interesting population, and I think you pointed it out, Katie, that there's a lot of variables in people's lives. We've had tremendous economic impact on people's lives the last few years. We've had, you know, the growth of substances, heroin addiction and prescription drug addiction has just skyrocketed, especially in New Hampshire. So we have all these other additional factors built in. But you pointed out something before the start of the show that I think is really important for the public to hear. And that's about the distinction between a panhandler and that homeless person who you are working with. Because panhandling has become an issue that's been brought to the attention of the Monadnock region's public.
Absolutely. From my experiences, the majority of the people that are panhandling, and I say the vast majority of people that are panhandling in the Keene area, are not homeless, or they're not from the area. And I see it as, I cover Sullivan County right now, Hillsborough, Western Hillsborough County, and Cheshire County. And from what I've seen, it's in Ringe, and they just skirt the river, so to speak. You'll see it in Walpole, any plaza that has a little medium, you'll see people out there. And it's usually they have dogs out there, and they really tug on your heartstrings. And when we approach most of these people and offer them help, they basically tell us to go pound sand. We're like, okay. And then you'll see them get in their cars and they'll drive off, or you'll see them walk into the hotel. But I don't want that to be the image of the homeless population that we deal with on a regular. Yes, is it frustrating to see those people out there at times? I'd be lying if I said no. You know, I get frustrated. I get approached all the time myself. But that's not what we deal with on a regular basis. The majority of the people on Main Street that are panhandling are in fact sheltered. So I just wanted to make that clear. You know, I don't want that to people to get a distaste in their mouth for the overall population, because the majority of the people that we deal with are kind-hearted individuals that have fallen down, and then you just help getting back up on their feet and moved back in the right direction. It takes some time, you know, it's longer or it takes more time for others than, you know, some, but eventually we'll get there. And, you know, I just wanted to discuss that a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm curious whether you're seeing a bit younger population at all, because there's been a lot of questions around that in debate, and we know the challenges the younger generation is facing trying to get into the workforce right now, and it is challenging, and lots of times they can't provide for themselves because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, I would say there is a younger generation that we're seeing. Again, different variables for all of them. More recently, we've had calls from 17, 18-year-old, you know, some high school students that sadly just don't like mom or dad's rules and think that they're going to go out and become homeless and tent and be okay. And we try to put reality back in place for some of them. So it's not so much, I don't think the ones we're seeing at least aren't the coming out of high school trying to get a job or something like that. It's they're having a hard time following whatever rules are set in place, and they're not technically homeless. They have a home. They just don't like to, you know, obey mom, dad, grandma's, whoever's rules at the house. So that's tough.
So let's demystify this a little bit, I think, because I think there's probably a lot of myths out there about who our homeless population is. Can you give a story, or let's break some of these myths that may be out there?
Right. Well, I can't speak for everybody, but what I was taught growing up through the school system, elementary school, middle school, and high school, is that the homeless person that you're going to see on the streets is pushing a shopping cart around with trash and beer cans and what have yous, and they're drunk and they sleep under newspaper and cardboard boxes. That's a very, very minute percentage. I'm willing to bet at any given moment that people walk by, I don't know, not a lot of homeless people, but more homeless people than they think on Main Street, and they would never know. It's not the stereotype. Typically, or in some cases, it's somebody that either had a house fire or, lost their job, their car broke down. Rural homelessness is tough. It's not like we have city transit where, well, we do have the City Express, but in comparison to like Manchester or Boston, buses take you everywhere. In outlying towns, we don't have that here. So if you're stuck in Walpole and you're homeless, with no car, well, how do you get to those resources? You got to come to Keene and then find a place in Keene, because Keene is kind of a hub with all the resources, and the job opportunities are much better than the outlying towns. So everyone's seeing that flock to Keene, but it's not as, how do I say it? It's not the stereotype. And, like I was saying earlier, you walk by more homeless people than one would think in any given moment. I just hope that people can kind of think above the stereotype and realize that it could happen to any one of us. Homelessness doesn't have a face, a color. I've dealt with people that have had doctorates that have been very wealthy. I've dealt with people that have had nothing, and so it's a wide variety. The spectrum is huge. It's one job loss, it's one car repair, or one broken down car away from potentially becoming homeless. So,
Katie, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I guess to put a face, some of the problems, this is your big thing, is the registered sex offenders that are out there. There's really nowhere to help them. They're willing to work. No one wants to hire them. If they have income, no one wants to house them. So that's, one of the things that we deal with. And it's tough. It's things like that where people have made some mistakes or, have some criminal history and they just can't get out of it. And that's sex offenders aside, just criminal history. Yeah. They messed up when they were 18 and they have a felony on their record. And, now years later, no one wants to hire them for a job, and ultimately no one wants to house them anywhere. So that's an issue we have too, I think, and that is somewhat of the population out there too.
And for me, just in my personal opinion, for what it's worth, it's kind of mind-boggling that we don't have shelters for registered sex offenders. When they get released back into the community, they kind of roam. Well, to me, it makes sense that we have a building for them, good, bad, or indifferent. At least we know where they're at. And there's different levels of sex offenses. So you hear sex offender, it could be a wide variety of different things, and I don't condone anything that happens there, don't get me wrong, but, they're human beings at the end of the day. They deserve a chance to at least have a shelter. I feel that's a need. It's not a want, it's a need, for anybody. Another barrier that we come across is, as Katie's mentioned, is criminal, history, but also poor credit. Well, realistically, the population that we deal with are going to have some things on their background that aren't probably the best. They're probably going to have terrible credit. But these are barriers that we have to overcome with various housing agencies, because they check credit, they check history. And so it's part of ways to advocate for the individuals or families that we're working with to, try to convince, and we offer classes at SCS that help with this stuff, like life skills and, Tenancy 101, that will most landlords in the area will accept our certificates, right? They've been through our training. We can kind of put that past in the past and really focus on the individual moving forward. So it's just advocating for the individual, kind of knocking down doors that they have trouble knocking down, and just being a voice where they're not being heard, really, is the approach I take.
Well, I think that advocacy piece is so important, because sometimes when you are a disenfranchised person, it's really hard to have your voice and have it heard. So having the two of you there to be able to assist with that and support that, and not only give people a voice, but give them some options. And you're absolutely right, it's basic human need. Shelter, food, water are basic needs that we all have, regardless of our histories, regardless of our mental health or our substance abuse issues. We should all be caring for one another in that way. There's some things happening at the state level that could have some significant impact on the work that you do and the work that other services that support you do. And I've really been trying to highlight those because I think sometimes the public, we get in our world and we say, it's not my problem. But the reality is, it is, because it's about caring for one another and making sure that people's basic needs are met. So what's the impact on your services if some of these budget cuts that the state's looking at right now go through?
Well, for me right now, it's directly affecting me. SCS has an office up in Claremont, New Hampshire, and we had an outreach worker up there that's retired, and there was also a shelter manager up there, emergency housing coordinator that's moved on. And so right now, the emergency housing coordinator in Keene and myself are covering down those positions. So, that's increased my workload by 2 times at the very least. I usually deal with about 30 to 35 people, new people a month, maybe some repeats in there. Now it's upwards of 70-ish. And with that comes case management. And I know Tyler, the emergency housing coordinator, is doing his best to run the shelter. But we can't make any moves until we figure out what that budget's going to be. So if they slash the budget in half like they're talking about, realistically it's going to cost the public just as much, because you're taking away services that are kind of, picking up that slack. You look at the emergency room stays, the overnights, and at the corrections. I mean, it just all adds up. The taxpayers are going to pay either way. Let's just be honest there. So I feel that this is the cheaper way to go about it. If I remember correctly, and don't quote me on this, I think without the services in place, the average homeless individual displaced person is like $20,000 a year with emergency room stays, all the other stuff. At least we can come in and kind of scale that back, try to house them first in a rapid manner, work on their mental illness, what have you, addictions, and keep them permanently housed. It's cheaper. This is just the way I look at it,
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. They, there's a lot of research done, particularly around prevention work, which Katie is very involved in, and especially on the substance abuse end. For every time we provide housing or those basic needs and keep people out of the correctional system or keep them in a job, even if it's part-time, it reduces our costs. We save $7 for every dollar we spend on prevention. So it becomes very, very critical for us to be thinking about this. But also that safety net of services that you connect with could be impacted. I understand ServiceLink is up for a potential elimination across the state. And tell us a little bit about the role ServiceLink plays with both of you.
For me, it's a big one. Given the wide spectrum of what I do, they step in and help out with a lot of the Social Security stuff. And that is a big thing for a lot of the clients that I deal with. They're trying to get into the system, they're fighting the system, they've hit walls, they've been denied, how do I appeal? And if I could certainly take the time and sit down with each individual that I work with and go through those steps, that would be great. Unfortunately, given the structure and the nature of my job, I don't. So I heavily rely on ServiceLink to help them out through that Social Security issue, whether it be applying for SSI, SSDI, food stamps, getting that stuff up and running. They're a big part in the community, and I just hope that they stay a part of the community that we work with personally.
Katie, any thoughts about other services in the state that you see potentially being impacted that could either increase your workload potentially, or just make that safety net of service not available?
Well, I mean, I think Ryan covered most of it, but me, I have If things get cut, it's going to be difficult, like Ryan said. But I usually have people within my agency I refer people to. So he uses ServiceLink for Social Security, where I have like a specialist at my agency that handles that only. And like the employment programs and stuff like that. We have that at Monadnock Family Services, so that's not something that I usually do referrals out to. I usually send it to the person within my agency, and then they would refer to ServiceLink. So I could imagine the other people in my agency having those difficulties. One of the things I think that could be affected was, I know they were talking about shelters being cut. That'd be a huge issue for both of us, and I'm sure other agencies. Even right now, it's been beautiful, and our shelters are full in the area. So we're trying to be creative and trying to put families somewhere that they're not sleeping, in a tent or a car, things like that. So I think if the shelter cuts happen, that's going to affect us really bad.
Absolutely.
It's such a domino effect, and I think sometimes people say, because I know community health centers, for example, are also up for cuts, and MFS is our community health center here in the Monadnock region. Monadnock Developmental Services was on the show last week, and that will have tremendous impact if they do the cuts to the disability services, which my guess is would increase your population
Yes,
substantially
definitely.
that you'd be working with. And now you're working with people who have some severe physical disabilities, emotional disabilities, and we're in that type of service for a very specific reason. So we've now created a domino effect. Every time we impact just one of those groups, it's a kind of a fragile system when you think about it. So, I really want you to be advocates out there and thinking about what it means when services get cut here in the state and the impact it has on each and every one of these things. And when you worry about people becoming homeless or their basic needs not being met, it's incredibly important for you to be an advocate, to reach out, contact your senator, contact your state rep, and make sure you're advocating for the needs of our very own neighbors and citizens here in the Monadnock region. If folks needed to reach out to you, and one of the things that was interesting for me is when I was doing this show early on, I had a young person stop me on Main Street, and they had happened to catch the show, and it had been about 100 nights, and about the community kitchen. And they were probably a little bit of that population you were talking about, Katie. Someone that didn't want to be home anymore, was couch surfing, so essentially homeless because they didn't have a place to really be and stay. Although they were sheltered, yes, but they were moving from place to place, sleeping on porches and things. And they said, watching the show really helped them find out where they could reach out and find some services. So if people needed to reach out to you, how would they do that?
I mean, there's a variety of ways. I would say maybe 2-on-1 is probably the best first to find out what they're actually looking for. If they're looking for Ryan or myself, they usually do a good job of filtering that. If not, I'm sure they could contact our agencies directly and connect us that way.
So they could reach out. Folks, if you can't remember anything but this, dial 211.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And
It's the
211
easiest.
will connect you to any kind of referral service that you need. And if you are homeless and you are in need of services, such as Ryan and Katie are talking about, you can dial that number and they'll get you to both of you. You can also visit the Monadnock Family Services or the Southwestern Community Services websites if you have internet access, recognizing that a lot of you don't. You can call, you can walk in. MFS is located on Main Street here in Keene. The SCS has offices over on Community Way. So folks can also walk in if they're in need of services, and I'm sure they can be connected with the two of you.
And if they're just to interrupt you, if they're looking for me at Monadnock Family Services, I'm at the office on 93rd Street. But not that it's a far walk if they showed up at Main Street, but
And that's
door to
great
door
to
to
know.
Ryan.
Yes. And you both talked about you do a lot of the outreach work. So it's not really people coming into the office so much. You're really sort of out there. Tell me about a time where you felt like your services really made a difference in a person's life.
Oh man, geez, it's so hard to say because more often than not, when we successfully place somebody, it's on to the next person, and it's kind of you hate to say it, but you forget about them. I think one recently is a gentleman I've been working with who has been all over the map. And through help of an attorney and his, it basically was income dependent. We couldn't house him without his income. He's a very nice guy. He's just needs help, figuring things out and how the system works. So I just got news today that his Social Security got approved, so we'll be able to house him here shortly, and he'll be on his own and independent and doing good things. And he always loves to give back too. He helps me out with the food distribution that I do every other month for the Cheshire County. So he said anytime he needs or I need anything, to give him a shout, and he'll be there. So there's a lot of little success stories. They may come as just far as getting someone connected to, like Katie, and getting the mental health thing, or getting some food stamps. That's for the family. That $400 made the huge difference. And I think, just to give you guys a number, in the last 3 months we had a funding source that is no longer with us because I spent it all. But through the EHP, the Emergency Housing Program, each CAP agency had access to it, and out of the 34 people that got housed, individuals and/or families, we through SCS and with the help of Katie housed 29 of those. So we're setting a good trend here. Our bed nights have gone down each month or each year. I think our average length of stay is 59 days from worst case scenario to best case scenario. So we're trying to set a trend. Housing first is really what we want to do, and we find once they're housed, then they can work on the mental illness, then they can work on the addiction. Utah has taken this approach, and they have eradicated 74 to 70% of their homeless population. And what that does is, if we can house them first, then we can start shifting money, not necessarily cut it, but shift money to the housing first mentality, close down a shelter, maybe take that money and apply it to the housing first. So I think, just to kind of tie it back into the budget cuts, it works. It's working in Utah. Why can't it work here? So kind of got off topic there with success stories, but yeah, there's just a lot. I think we do really well as a team here, and it's agencies in itself. As the guy I just mentioned, he says one hand shakes the other. Well, I am only as good as Katie and, and any other agency that I refer people to, so.
And it's not just about referral. I think of, the community kitchen. Phoebe's been on the show a few times, and she talks a lot about a lot of people think it's the homeless population that's primarily accessing the community kitchen. And they're a portion of the population that comes there for access to food, but she's dealing with a large senior population who just can't make ends meet month to month. And, oftentimes, I'm guessing some people are truly homeless and need that stable housing, and other people, it may be a temporary thing where if you can get them that stable housing in that moment, then you can really transition them and move them along. And I know we had a family that was actually on the show with one of our other services, and they had utilized the housing stabilization program over at SCS. And they talked about it got them on the right path because they needed other services. They had some substance abuse issues. They had some other things going on that they needed to deal with. But once they got on that path, they're able to take care of their family, able to get a job, and create stability in their lives. And housing was absolutely critical to that. That if you don't feel safe, it's pretty hard to think about meeting any of the other needs in your life, I think. And I think we forget that as human beings, that if you don't feel like you got a place to lay down at night or a place to go and feel physically safe and protected from the elements, it can be a pretty frightening experience, especially if you have a family.
Right.
And I'm guessing you probably see families.
Yes.
There's been a spike in that lately. When I first started outreaching, it was a lot of singles, maybe couples. But now I'm dealing with families of 4, families of 6. Not enough shelter space. So then I rely on town welfare directors to hopefully step up and kind of patch it over while we work with them hand in hand to when shelter availability opens up. Now, there's an up and down to this. Typically speaking, the family that we deal with has connections to the community. well, if I find shelter space, let's say in Portsmouth, that can, accommodate their needs, who wants to go from all their support? So it's convincing an individual or individuals to leave what support they have to go to an unfamiliar area. Some rather just choose to sleep in their car because they know they've got support here. Or what I also try to do is friends and families. If we can keep them out of the shelter, that opens up beds for some potential somebody. And shelter is not the answer for everybody either. But if we can keep them out there and still work on their housing and still keep them connected to the community, that's good as well. But the families are on the rise. To address your seniors citizen thing that you mentioned earlier, I just read an article where New Hampshire's elderly population is starting to get bigger and bigger, and so there's going to be a need where we're going to need more senior housing. And what do we do? I mean, I've had a call from 3 65 plus people, and one into their 70s, saying they needed a homeless shelter, and I'm like, wow, that's radical to me to think that a population that has done so much for wherever they're at is now looking at homelessness at this age. I'm like, so how can I fix it? So I do the best we can. We do the best we can with, some, help with security deposit, direction through your welfare director. If the welfare director don't want to help you, as long as we get a letter of decision, we can access other funding. And it's just, I try to make things happen as fast as I can. It's usually, as I tell anybody, it never goes as fast as we want it to. It's 2 weeks to a month before all the paperwork either catches up with itself or you get approved and the background checks come back. So it's just keeping the spirit of the individuals up or individual, and keep trying to tell them to focus on positive things, not so much all the negative things. And I think that works, but it's going to be a crisis.
And you're absolutely right, because the United Way had participated in doing a region-wide assessment of well-being in the region, and one of the things that's identified in that is that we have a growing population of the elderly, and that's across the state of New Hampshire. And because the baby boomer population's retiring out now, we're having a huge influx into that senior needs category. And the system isn't designed right now to really support that, and people are struggling to survive that month to month on their paychecks. They may need help at little points along the way. Again, sort of debunking that myth around the homeless, that it can be sometimes a temporary situation for a person where they just need someone like the both of you coming in and assisting them, helping them get the services they need and on that track of stability. And then there's other folks that choose to remain homeless, and for lots of different reasons. I had a young man that I had worked with from Hinsdale for a long time, and he wanted to be homeless. He likes being homeless. He didn't have a good home situation. He much prefers the friendships he's developed. And I think that's, sort of another myth, that these folks live lots of times in isolation, and they don't necessarily live in isolation. They have a community and a sense of community. So, he felt a real sense of community and belonging there that he never experienced at home. So, he's made that decision to live homeless. He lives over on the Vermont side. I'm sure he crosses over to our side. And that's the other interesting thing. We have to remember, we're a border town.
Yes.
We're a border town on Massachusetts and Vermont. People are moving. They go where they're going to get some services, some support to get them on that right path. And, everybody, again, wants access to food, to shelter. So, they'll come here, I guess, at times. I think the other thing we sometimes miss is we think about it during the winter. And it's not a winter issue. What are you seeing right now as we're moving into the warm months?
Well, typically in the winter we do very well at sheltering people with the help of 100 Nights and the cold weather shelters that pop up. We get people off the streets, so that's good. But when it's warm out, or when those shelters close, all those people are going back into the woods, and it gets hot. It gets hot in New Hampshire, hot and muggy. So part of what we do is when we're outreaching into the woods, we pack out water, bug spray, and various supplies, to help them sustain. not all of our homeless population is exactly mobile and can carry out that kind of water, so we do, or other supplies. So we try to fit their needs where they are. It's a fine line, to be honest with you, between enabling and seeing progression, but everyone's very appreciative of that we deal with. They are very happy for the water that we bring out to them, because more often than not, they can't afford it either way, and the bug spray, well, they love the bug spray because it gets, as we know, in New Hampshire, it gets pretty crazy out there with the bugs, and so that's also a great thing to build a rapport with people. They see two individuals coming out them in the hot, winter or summer, bringing out, backpacks full of water, bug spray. That's just another barrier breaker, and it ultimately ends into potential housing based on income or, again, backgrounds of the individuals, but that's part of it, and what I did at 100 Nights, for those that chose to stay out during the winter, I gave a cold weather class, did that a couple of times. I went through winter phase of mountaineering school in the Army, so they taught us how to survive in the cold, so I tried to apply that to the population that we dealt with, or we deal with. And what I'll be doing here is I coordinated with Jeff at the end of this month. I'll be giving a hot weather class, if you will. Signs of dehydration, heat stroke, things to do to prep your camp to keep them as cool as possible, chigger signs, all that stuff that can catch up with you, sand fleas, any of those things can be detrimental to one's health. So I try to prep them as best I can, and just hopefully that it all works out for everybody at the end of the day.
Anything you really want the public to know about the work you're doing and the population that you're working with?
I think something we haven't covered is that we work with people that aren't just homeless, but at risk of being homeless. So I know we didn't cover that. So if people are, behind in rent or having difficulty, they can reach out to us because it's easier for us to keep them housed than for them to become actually homeless and to start all over again. And that goes back to the success stories, being able to work with a landlord and work out a payment plan, or there's a few times where we got oil turned on people's houses that didn't have money for oil. Things like that are helpful too. So we have a wide variety of clients, and I just felt that we didn't cover the fact that we don't just work with the homeless. We try to,
Right.
prevent people. So the prevention is huge.
That's a very, very important message, because I think people lots of times don't realize all that great work is going on sort of behind the scenes, just really trying to keep people stable and in their home environments, and that's an important piece of information. But it is a delicate balance too, because and that's where that web is just so critical, because it may mean the community kitchen comes in, and that extra food may help keep them paying rent, or having transportation services and knowing that that's available and able to get them to a job. Those are all the little things that keep the whole system working and working well. So when we have a breakdown in any of that system, and with the budget cuts, we could have a potential significant impact on any aspect of that system right now. It can play itself out in many, many different ways. You are doing some great work out there. Why do you do this?
It's overall really rewarding, I think, to see that family get a place of their own, to see someone who is having some struggles with mental health or substance abuse get clean. Things like that are really rewarding. There's also some tough days, where you go home and you think about what happened and wish you could fix the situations. But when you improve someone's life just a little bit, whether it's getting them a food box or getting oil turned on in their house or things like that, is definitely rewarding, I think.
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit earlier. When I got out of the Army, I had floated for a good 3 years, and if it wasn't the help of some agencies in the area, God knows where I'd be. It'd probably be another number, in jail. I wouldn't even know. But I'm personally driven to do this because what vets brought me into this line of work, being a vet. I want to help vets, but it's not just about vets. It's about everybody at the end of the day. And we all have our story. We all have our history. But it's how we we develop from that and move forward. As I tell people, you know, your history is your history. Today is a new day to invent yourself. You know, you can let that bother you, and you can let that be the monkey on your shoulder, and you can let people, you know, people are going to judge you, but you have to prove people wrong in all aspects of whatever it might be, because there's a label, there's a stereotype. And if my veteran status means anything to anybody, as somebody that's going to take those heat rounds, as we used to say in the Army, those bullets, to be a face and say, you know what, it's not the stereotypes, it's not what you think it is. Because I used to be that guy that would be judging, oh, it's just another bum, you know, or what have you. But it's not that. It's a lot more people out there, you think, that aren't homeless that are, and we do our best to keep them out of that situation. So I do it just for personal reasons, and hopefully, you know, one day when I'm older and maybe in a similar situation, there's a young guy or girl that comes along equally as driven to help me out and to just trickle it down into the whole system in itself, I guess.
Such a powerful message from both of you that, you know, it's not just about it being rewarding work, it's really about making a difference in people's lives and knowing that in some little way you may have put the path or the course of their life in a different direction. And I think we all want to be a part of that, and we all have an opportunity to be a part of that. And if people wanted to reach out to support your programs or help you, do they contact Monadnock Family Services and Southwestern Community Services? And do you need volunteers?
Oh boy. You know, I can be contacted via through our agency, which is 603-352-7512. Ask the receptionist to patch you into me. You can also email me at rbell@scshelps.org. And make sure you put some in the subject box, otherwise I'll go to my spam box. But yeah, you know, volunteers are always good. You know, food distribution every other month. You know, it's always good to get new people out there to see the effect that this food distribution not only has with the community kitchen, but we do all the pantries in Cheshire County, and it's the big impacts like that. You know.
So I would love to spend more time with you, but we have to bring the program to a close. Believe it or not, our hour is up. And so appreciate you being with us, and appreciate you, audience, being with us, and remind you that if you need these services, you can reach out through 211, or you can support these services by contacting Monadnock Family Services or Southwestern Community Services. And volunteers, you're welcome. Want to leave you with this message. As always, remember to live united, to give, to volunteer, to advocate. Thanks for being with us.